It's the TARDIS there, fluttering and flapping across the screen as it would have done in the mid-70s on BBC. One of these fabulous continuity slides that would let us know, as keen viewers, that Doctor Who was coming soon. You'd only got the football results and whatever else to sit through until TV heaven finally hit. We're going to relive some of that on this edition of our before show, after show, and in between show Type 40 Extra. But who's calling this time? Who is calling in this time? I'm happy to say it's my two besties. I've got Simon Horton and Sarah Graham here to go through another chunk of classic Doctor Who at Christmas too.
God, it does. It just talk about all your Christmases coming at once. It doesn't get any better, does it? It doesn't get any better.
It's just me that's letting the side down without the knitwear.
Yeah.
You are letting it down.
Yeah,
you definitely get yourself a jumper.
Yeah, you got to get a Christmas jumper.
Does it count that I've got knitwear on my head?
Ish. You might get away with it. If you've got a nice coloured scarf, perhaps you might get away with it more so.
I'll tell you what, it always looked really drafty in the unit laboratory. Not only does that floor look really, really cold, the studio floor there, but the whole place seemed just really, really parky all the time.
It did, and don't forget, of course, they had to film an episode of Blue Peter from this very set during the production of Robot, didn't they? Do you remember? They broadcast an episode of Blue Peter from this set because of the fact that there was a strike on at the time at the BBC, and so they couldn't strike the Robot set. And so it stayed in, and they did the entire episode of Blue Peter from the Doctor Who set, and it included not only the unit lab set, but they also used the vaults that where the K1 robot breaks up from under the ground into the vault. They used it. They just had to. They went with it. But that was what happens in the days of the BBC, wasn't it? They were freewheeling. They just went with stuff, and it worked. It did work. It made it more exciting, to be honest.
Well, that is sort of what we're doing this time on this Type 40 Extra series.
Quite right.
The only thing missing is a drop of the hard stuff. I've only got sparkling water in here, flavoured water.
I've got tea. Yeah, definitely. It's winter. It's a cup of tea. Day.
Cheers anyway.
Cheers.
Cheers. Merry Christmas.
Definitely Merry Christmas. It's funny though because I can remember this going out so clearly. I remember very, very clearly the repeat omnibus of Planet of the Spiders just a few days beforehand, and I remember just bawling my eyes out over Christmas. And get this, Sarah, my parents, to appease me, to cheer me up, they took me to see Santa. I remember being taken to see Santa Claus in the department store because I was just so upset about Planet of the Spiders, because I thought that Doctor Who had died. I didn't understand it, and I thought the Doctor had died, and so I just bawled my eyes out. I was about 5 or 6 at the time? Yes, 6 at the time.
Oh, bless.
I know. But then I remember seeing this episode just a couple of days later, the beginnings of Robot, and it was just it was so exciting because suddenly the Doctor was reborn, and it was Christmas, and it was just a joy to be a 6-year-old Doctor Who fan at this point.
They could have got the timing right after all with this.
Well, I think they did get the timing right. I think perfectly with this. It's of course as a result, the Tom Baker era starts actually in 1974 rather than in 75. When that's when you think of Tom Baker, is it 75? But I just remember this between Christmas and New Year just so well, and it just being such an exciting time. As I say, I was just beyond excited to see.
That explains, though, why I always get confused when I think of the Tom Baker era, and so I recount when did it start and when did it end. Because I've got it in my head that he played the Doctor for 7 years, but it was actually 7 seasons, wasn't it? Pretty much across 6 years.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But yeah, as I say, it started just a couple of days before 74 turned into 75. Happy days. I've just got such happy memories of it. Sarah, you weren't even.
I wasn't even thought of.
You weren't even thought of. Bless you.
I mean, they're happy days for us, those of us around to remember it, Simon. Happy days for us. I do sometimes wonder how happy or not they were for Tom Baker himself, because he seems to have blocked out so much of his time as Doctor Who, which does seem a great shame. But then again, maybe that adds something to the mystique as well. Because if Doctor Who has a single sort of indelible stamp, a shape, a silhouette, a superstar, even pretty much anything you can think of that begins with an S, come to think of it, it's likely to be the fourth incarnation as personified by Tom Baker here. Larger than life and other such adjectives. We've heard them all, repeated them all probably hundreds of times, because we've had a full 5 decades now to do so. On Saturday, the 28th of December, 2024, it's exactly 50 years since Tom made his first proper speaking appearance as the Doctor on screen. And so this is something that I'd only ever read about or seen the odd black and white image from, Simon, but you were there in front of the telly watching it at the time.
And as I say, I can just remember so clearly. I remember sitting with my mom watching this, because, as I say, as a 6-year-old, it was a difficult thing to get your head round the fact that the Doctor had died, and I'd watched him die, and as I say, I was upset about it, and then suddenly he was reborn again. And I've got clear memories of the entire story of Robot. I remember the tank. I remember the Action Man tank. I remember them all being outside the bunker when the giant robot came out. So yeah, this was I would say for me, Robot was definitely the point that I probably became obsessed by Doctor Who, because I'd loved it through the John Pertwee years, but to see it reborn with a new actor and reinvigorated and just so exciting, I think it was. And of course, then I fell in love with Tom Baker immediately. I know with some people it wasn't immediate. And when you look at the audience research reports on Robot, there's quite damning criticism of Tom.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Doctor Who fans? You surely not. I mean, the thing is, nowadays, of course, Sarah, when they change the lead actor on Doctor Who, usually they don't just give us even a full sort of 45-minute episode to get used to them. They usually put out a feature-length episode, give it an hour, even longer sometimes, just to give you as much of the new actor as they possibly can, don't they? But that wasn't how it was done back then. It's just 25 minutes, like it or lump it. You'll either love him or you won't.
It was, but I mean, but they were savvy enough, weren't they, the production, to keep that. You've still got that unit family, so you've got that settling period where it is more or less the same. You've still got the Brigadier, you've got Sarah, you've got Benton, so you've got them characters like hold your hand, and watching how they react. I imagined, that was a big help for the fan. But I've got a feel for you, Simon, because I remember how possessive I got to Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah.
Only 13 episodes, and I hated David Tennant when I first saw him. I was like, who the hell is this?
Yeah.
But to have had all these years of wonderful John.
Yeah.
To see him go, I can see how it was like a bereavement.
But you're right, Sarah, in that, again, I can remember even as a 6-year-old appreciating seeing the Brigadier and Sarah there in the same way that Rose smoothed over the transition from Eccleston to Tennant. Sarah and the Brig in particular really did smooth over that transition, because you're right. You did feel you were just sitting there watching your bunch of mates, but there was just a different mate there now. One of them had gone and there was a new one coming, but you were still watching your mates, and it was savvy of the production team to do that. It's often talked about how they sort of would keep some companions to smooth out, and it does make absolute sense. There's an argument for a sort of a hard reset where everybody is new, but there's an equally good argument for a softer reset, and you smooth it over with familiar faces that you already know and love. And at this point, the unit family were just huge. Everybody loved the Brigadier. Everybody loved Sarah. So it did make sense.
They made sure that the Cybermen were there at the press call. Yeah, so there's Liz Sladen alongside Tom Baker and a Cyberman from The Invasion, I think. So that was there in the press to reassure children such as yourself, Simon, that it was business as usual, I suppose, when the Doctor would reappear or sit up again on screen.
Well, I think at this point, because John Pertwee had made the show far more successful than even under Patrick Troughton, Doctor Who was very much loved by the public at this point. And so I think really this was the first time when Tom was cast, this was the first time that actually the press took an enormous interest in the casting of a new Doctor, because it had become a normal practice now within the show to recast the Doctor. And so the press were now picking up on that and making something out of it.
On the baton being passed and an idea of legacy as well as familiarity.
Yes. Absolutely, but it's interesting. I was thinking, see, there's the publicity photo from a little bit further down the line with the Daleks, and it always amazed me that they didn't roll out a Dalek for the actual announcement of Tom Baker as the Doctor. You're quite right; they brought out a Cyberman, but they didn't bring out the Dalek, which amazes me. And we had to wait until this was the reveal of the costume, which
it's quite likely that the decision would have been for practical purposes. So obviously these pictures were taken in and around the concrete donut, weren't they? Where they could sort of push them around, push them out of the big double doors, roll them around, and then push them back in. Whereas the original one, I think, was at some sort of it was outside of a BBC facility, wasn't it? White City or something like that.
And as I recall, I think I could be wrong here, but I think as I recall, it's actually up on a roof. It's on a sort of a sky terrace. Right. Yeah. It might even be. It might be at the top of BBC. It might be at the top of the concrete donors. I don't know at the. I can't remember, but you're right. It's definitely it's not in the usual place. That's for sure.
So never mind the Daleks keeping their domes on. It's odds are Tom would not have been able to keep that hat on more than 1 or 2 seconds. No. There's always a practical reason. Always a practical reason for these things. But here we are again going on about Tom Baker. We did the big 88th birthday party for him on YouTube on Type 40 Live a few years ago. And then for the 60th anniversary, we did a real sort of deep dive on his era, didn't we? And we reviewed Image of the Fendel too. And so when it came to the point where we were approaching another anniversary, a Who-niversary of his 50th on-screen appearance, and we got some messages, we got some feedback from people in the Type 40 community. We love you all, of course we do. And they were saying, are you going to do anything for Tom's 50th? Well, no, not really. Haven't we said it all? And I thought, well, we have. Or have we? But we could get together and watch in real time his very first appearance all together for the first time, couldn't we?
Makes absolute sense. It would be rude not to.
Really. Exactly.
Any excuse to talk about Tom. Can we ever talk about Tom enough? I don't think so. I don't think we're ever going to run out of superlatives to talk about Tom.
I mean, I remember when we did the birthday party for him on Type 40 Live, we did hear word back through friends of friends that Tom knew about this party on YouTube.
Wow.
And of course we invited him, and I'm assured that he said that he couldn't appear on the show even if he wanted to, because it wasn't starting until after his bedtime.
Bless him. Quite right. Legend. Absolute legend. And who are we to argue with Tom Baker's bedtime?
I don't think I'd even now I wouldn't argue with him. Of course, it was all about this Saturday tea times, the familiar sights of a BBC globe. There was always a globe of one form or another. Certainly in my youth, I think the globe sort of, is it back now? It was just a sort of general sort of circle shape thing that they use. But this was all part of the kind of familiarity as well, and that coziness that was around television back in the 4-3 years, wasn't it?
It was, but of course, at this time of year, they would have had a Christmas globe. That's what they used to do, wasn't it? The one year they had a Christmas. Do you remember the one year they would have it? They turned the globe into Christmas pudding. The one year they had baubles hanging in the shape of the worlds, the globe, with it painted on. They did all manner of things. They messed around with. They always had a proper Christmas ident. I'd love to know what it would have been in 1974 before. I don't remember it. Maybe they hadn't started doing the Christmas ident by then. Maybe it was a little bit later. They certainly had it by sort of about 76, 77. They'd got a Christmas ident.
Instagram and X at Type 40 Doctor Who, if you know
Yeah, we want
which
to know.
one.
We really do want to
somebody
know.
knows. Somebody will know. Listens.
Yeah, the sight of Tom Baker sort of looming out of the title sequence for the first time, Simon. I mean, my earliest memories of Doctor Who are when Tom was doing it. So for me, he was Doctor Who. This was all part and parcel of it. But was this a big change as well? You know, because it's such a solemn look. I know that they changed the sequence for Pertwee in the last season, hadn't they? And he was sort of full body, wasn't it, with his arms sort of crossed across him, which is kind of weird. But this is a very different sort of statement to make. There's nothing friendly about this. I wouldn't say he looks hostile in this picture, but he looks kind of distant.
He does look. It still amazes me to this day why they chose this photo. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticising. I love this photo, and I think it works perfectly.
It's iconic.
It is iconic, and it does work
iconic.
perfectly. This sort of somber, solemn look works perfectly for the Hinchcliffe years in particular. It doesn't work quite so well later on, once it becomes more comedic, but it works very well for the Hinchcliffe years because it is so gothic, so ghostly. But it was a bold choice. It was an odd choice to have such a somber Doctor. I wonder whether Philip Hinchcliffe regrets it. As I say, it wouldn't be criticism on my part at all. Far from it, quite the opposite. But you do wonder, looking at it, what were they thinking? What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I found it very odd when I first saw this. Then going into the episode, and he does do a very comedic, few scenes. So it doesn't really tally with what we're seeing. It's obviously like later on through the season.
Yeah.
So I always thought it was an odd choice. He looks really, really dour.
Yeah, he does.
Doesn't feel like Tom, does it?
It would have worked very well for season 18 that everybody always talks about. Is a sort of funereal season.
Yes.
But it is an odd and bold choice. But to say, I love it. I just love it, and it does, to me, speak about how I felt about Doctor Who at that point, which is that it was. Somber and serious is not the right word, but it was on the edge of your seat viewing. It was fearful. It was nightmarish. It was nerve-wracking. And so a grinning Tom Baker would simply not work well in that kind of context. That somber look just works perfectly for the style of Doctor Who that we were getting at that point.
I saw this image only a few years ago for the first time. Obviously, that's the fuller image.
Magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at that.
When I see this one in particular, there's a man sat there, sort of, as you said, distant, but quite casual. And he couldn't possibly have known at this point that this image was taken, that he was about to make his debut in a role that would change his life.
And about to suddenly become absolutely huge. I mean, this again, Sarah, is difficult for you to, well, it's impossible for you to appreciate that at the time, Tom was just ultimately became one of the biggest stars on TV, didn't he, Dan? He was but by the middle of the run, by the middle of his run on Doctor Who, he was absolutely huge. And you're right, Dan, he had absolutely no idea about at this point. He's probably still virtually working on the building site at the point that's taken.
Yeah.
He's probably got his building site boots on. Nearest, damn it. There we go.
That's the story we've all heard, isn't it? How he was actually working at the building site when he found out he got the job. Barry Letts made him keep it to himself for 2 weeks or so. So he had to keep turning up and doing the job and chatting with his workmates as well, with his colleagues and friends, without saying a word. I've heard him talk about that time, and he says about how his manner had changed, and people, they knew he was going for a job interview, but he wasn't allowed to say that he got it. But obviously his spirits must have lifted a little because they could tell that something had changed, and history was history was happening, wasn't it?
It is funny to think of it, that he was on a building site and the next day he was saving the universe, literally. and as we say, huge, just a massive star. And the fact that he took Doctor Who from a really popular show to a stratospherically popular show, where just everybody knew Doctor Who, and none of it was known at this point. None of it was known, and as I say, the early reviews and the early responses to Tom's run were not that good. It's incredible to think of it now, but he was not that popular to begin with.
I can't imagine it, because he's always been
crackers, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there was a degree of resistance to it, and I guess maybe it is because it's such a different performance to John Pertwee's. It's more, if anything, it's more akin to Patrick Troughton than it is. Certainly, there's very, very little in common with John Pertwee in his performance, I would say.
The Radio Times did everything they could, Sarah, to smooth the way with this illustration, this composite picture of the two actors kind of morphing from one to another.
That's John Culshaw next to John Pertwee.
It looks more like Sean Pertwee to me.
Actually, it does. Yeah,
it does, doesn't it?
We are about to relive Tea Time from Saturday, the 28th of December, 1974, in real time here together. So make sure you have your legitimately purchased DVDs or Blu-rays or downloads or anything else to hand for part one of Robot. So this is how it was billed by Terence Dicks, the great Terence Dicks. Terence, who was about to wind down as script editor, never mind writer, was a safe pair of hands to introduce a new Doctor to the same audience, I suppose.
Just looking at the billing there, it's Liz and Nicholas Courtney that are before Tom Baker. Is that just because that was?
I think that's because it's been done in appearance order. It's been done in order of appearance. But it's the only thing I can assume on that, because it's very odd to put, as you say, to put Tom third down. So it must be. Although actually, the first one we see is the robot. So he's technically he should be made the top of the list. So difficult to say quite why they came up with it. I always thought they should have come up with a better title than Robot. It never seemed.
Yeah, me too. It always seemed a bit like
it's dull.
Half-assed.
It is. That's the best they could do.
One-word titles are a little more Blake Seven.
Yeah. Well, they are when it's just a dull word like robot. When the book came out and it was the giant robot, it sounded a heck of a lot more exciting. It has to be said.
This is for you. From who? Doug. Doug who? That's right.
Those infamous BBC Christmas tapes.
Very, very silly indeed. So, yes, we are about to venture back to 1974 altogether to get the first chunk, the first 23-ish minutes worth of the fourth Doctor that would not just change the show, but probably change British television, if not the whole of the pop culture landscape too. So, yes, on the count of 4, I think. 4, 3, 2, 1.
That music still gets me every single time. That intro, it's just beautiful.
Slightly chilling.
And again, it does go with the style of the show at that point, which was chilling. It's just such a breathtaking title sequence as well. I mean, it's just years ahead of its time. Years ahead, and I don't think it's ever been bettered. I really don't.
I wonder if there was a working title for this that wasn't Robot. We'll have to look it up, won't we?
And so, obviously, for me, I'd seen this just a few days before on the repeat omnibus, as I say, of Planet of the Spiders. So it really did. It's beautiful the way it crosses over.
It's nice of them to do that. Consider it for the audience.
Yeah. And it just look at Nick's hair there. That's so 70s, isn't it? His hair. It's so 1974.
Even Tom's hair looks a little bit set, though, as if it was just
it does.
Still growing out from the previous incarnation.
Yeah.
Ian Marter straight in as Harry Sullivan for the first time too.
And I loved Harry. I still love
did,
Harry.
Yeah.
Still devastates me that he wasn't in more than he was.
Well, me too. I adored him.
Oh, Lego head there. Lego hair. Sean Benson.
They are. They're great. They're great. They're great hairstyles.
Yeah.
So mid-70s. But isn't that funny? I mean, you literally get, what was that, about 10, 15 seconds of Tom, and he's gone.
Yeah, he's off, and we've got everybody else.
Yeah.
You're right, Sarah. They're now concentrating.
And the action's off. We're off.
The action's off. Yeah, it's so clever to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I remember this so clearly. I remember this just sort of quite freaking me out. This was done by reflecting the output from the camera onto a sort of a mosaic.
Even by this point, though, Simon, after 12 years, we'd seen dozens of POV shots in Doctor Who.
Yes.
But this one does look different. Marking it out from the rest must have been quite tough then.
Yeah.
Constant innovation.
Yeah, and it works well. Considering this was done, obviously, in 74, it's quite sophisticated. It was a good idea. It does look like a sort of a robot's point of view. You could buy it. I just remember this like it was yesterday.
Do you really?
Yeah, because it was just so intriguing. I couldn't work out what was I looking at, but you worked it out enough to know. And it's Dudley Simpson's music, isn't it? It just works.
Yeah, the music
so well at giving you the sense of, okay,
with that subtle beeping as
well. And what are these claws that I'm looking at? I just remember, as I say,
well, it's hard to work out what any of it truly is, isn't it?
They look more like pincers.
Yeah, which they are.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
I always think that's a little bit hammy. It's just
it's not the best shot.
It's not the best shot. It's a bit. These work great. That one just pushes it a little bit too much.
You have to.
But you're right, Dan. It's interesting. They just get straight into the action. The story, top secret, in case you were in any doubt whatsoever. It is clever though, because what Terrance Dicks does so brilliantly is what are we only? How far are we in? We're 3 minutes in here, and already we're just setting up just what feels like a classic Doctor Who scenario.
Well, 3 minutes ago, Sarah was gravely concerned. Now she's all smiles again, wearing a summer hat.
Yeah, she's like, no. Yeah, her costume is very interesting in this story. She's almost, because she looked quite trendy in some of the.
She looks a bit conservative, doesn't she?
Yeah,
it's just a little bit conservative, a little bit twin
like
set pearls.
1920s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do find that quite sexy. I don't know why.
It's a work outfit, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that they're just not concentrating on the Doctor at all. They're not talking about the Doctor.
Yeah.
There's the Doctor mentioned, but basically we're just carrying on with the story, carrying on the adventure and the mystery, and they're just getting on without the Doctor. There's no, when you think of later stories, really concentrate on the Doctor going through this huge post-regenerative stress, and they're not bothered with that. They're just cracking on. They're motoring straight away.
I always found it difficult to get some idea of the way around Unit HQ, even though this sort of orientation was around for a few stories, wasn't it?
Yes.
Could never quite work out what was supposed to be where.
Yeah, well, the geography
where this was in any building.
Yeah, it never makes entire sense, the geography of Unit.
I love that face.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, even then, it's all in the
he's got it straight away, hasn't he? I mean, that is such a doctorish look. He was doing that pretty much right to the end. All of this is so doctorish. He's hit the ground running.
It really has. And I love that he's got the TARDIS key in the shoes, just, that little callback to Spearhead.
Correct.
There's lots of little touches.
Correct.
I mean, obviously, the story that we've all heard is that the reason why Harry Sullivan was created as he was is because they wanted originally to go. They envisaged it that he would be an older actor playing the Doctor. But I often wonder how much of this dialogue was always there and how much of it was tweaked when they were casting a man in his 40s. Because obviously an older actor wouldn't have chopped that thing in half there, wouldn't have karate chopped that.
No.
Love this moment. This was the very first scene I ever saw from this, and it was part of a clips package on Blue Peter, I think it was.
That's right. I remember seeing this on Blue Peter.
Yeah.
And this line of dialogue about the nose. The voice is there, isn't it?
I love that. I love that little nod to John, though.
John
I wonder what
Pertwee,
he
yeah,
thought
that
to
was a
this.
bit cheeky, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
a little bit cheeky to John Pertwee. He's brilliant, Tom, here. I mean, talk about hitting the ground running.
He is.
Saying it's not all of them have managed to
No.
step into the role quite as convincingly, as seemingly confidently as Tom Baker. You could be here till the cows come home debating that, I suppose, but it's undoubtedly there.
This is my favourite scene in the entire. Well, probably in the entirety of Robot, this is my favourite scene because they both play beautiful. Look at Tom there; he's so angry. There, he's so angry, and yet he does it so well.
This is brilliant. I remember just falling in love with him with it, and Ian Mortar as well. I mean, they're both.
It's crackers, isn't it?
But can you imagine John Pertwee doing any of that?
No.
Can you imagine it? Can you imagine it in any other drama? Of its time, just nothing. This is where Doctor Who is so unique because you'd never get that in anything other than Doctor Who.
Yeah, of course, it was all a ruse. The brick doesn't even need to look; he can hear the noise of the TARDIS.
Yes.
There's no such word as calm.
Again, these two, they just hit it off straight away, don't
The connection is there, yeah. Beautifully played. He's appealing to that side, to his nature, the responsibility that the earlier incarnation.
Look at that. It's just, it's priceless. He's playing the child through all of this. And of course, that was a deliberate choice on his part. He wanted to play it childlike.
You're never quite sure if he's winding him up there.
No.
He does remember him, really.
But look at that smile.
I think he does,
That really is the first time we see the true Tom Baker grin. The toothy grin.
I never get sick of seeing Nicholas Courtney doing various exasperated expressions.
Could have stood a lot more of Nick Courtney with Tom Baker's Doctor. It's a pity it was so sparse hereafter. John Scott Martin.
Yes.
In the football results.
This always made me laugh because that bar should have been on before, and he should have been already on the phone.
Talk about locking the stable door, yeah.
Too late was the crime.
This really bothers me again. It's just such an obvious piece of wood across that door. It's just so poor.
But at least it was wood, Simon, and not polystyrene.
Well, I suppose we should be grateful for that. It was clearly balsa wood. I mean, truth be told, I genuinely do think that the best parts of this story are the bits with Tom and the regular
without a
casting.
doubt.
This is thin. It's not the best. As I say, it's kind of your typical Doctor Who setup, but it is thin. But look at little Ian Martyr. He's just adorable.
See, this is all a little too broad for me with the various costumes.
I agree, Dan. This really
they just about get away with it, but only just about.
It never bothered me, but obviously I'm used. This is standard fare, I suppose.
No, it's too much for me. It bothers me. It's
very
too
Rent a
cheesy.
Ghost.
Yeah, you go. That's the perfect analogy, Dan. It's Rent a Ghost.
Well, I always thought it was like I don't know if it was deliberate, but like little nods. You've got like, the Viking helmet, like space helmet from a cow.
I get. I think it's not that clever, unfortunately, Sarah. I
I'm
think
reaching.
It's just
but-
whatever was on the rail at the
you're
back.
giving them more credit than
I
they
know I
than they
am.
deserve.
Because with these two costumes, I always felt like it was from the Celestial Toy Maker.
Oh,
and I was
okay,
like,
that's interesting. I've never seen that.
his face. But yeah, I probably am just reading.
It is just too much. It's too silly because it's impossible for him to have done the changes that quick. That's what bothers me. It's just too ridiculous. The rest of it I can believe, but
The
that's
TARDIS had done it. That's the.
Yeah, it's just stretching credibility, isn't it? It bothers me. I can't remember what I made of it as a kid. I probably wasn't bothered by it as a kid. But this to me is, look at this. I love this squashed dandelion.
Did we ever see him with the eyepiece again after this?
Ooh, you've asked
As a
me.
bit of
Actually, I
kit.
don't think so.
Because
No, I
the
don't
Fourth
think we
Doctor
did.
does have little bits of kit here and there, doesn't he? Rather than an actual sort of toolbox.
It is remarkable how he's just bang on with this performance from
Yeah.
You forget this. It's easy to watch this and forget that this was his first stint.
Simon, did they record the studio stuff before the location stuff, or the other way around?
That's a really good question, because always they would have filmed I would imagine they probably still did the location stuff first, because they always did the location stuff first. But of course, this is different, because unlike this is the first story where the location stuff is all on outside broadcast videotape as opposed to film.
Oh, yeah.
So what's interesting, of course, is Spearhead from Space, which is John's first story, is all on film. Robot, as Tom's first story, is all on videotape, and it's the first
And both of them were filmed
story.
at the same location.
Correct.
Yes.
It's exactly the same location at Wood Norton, remarkably.
Sir Clive Sinclair there too, in an early acting role before he graduated, I suppose.
I'm lucky to have been to. I'm lucky to have worked at Wood Norton as a BBC facility, and I did resist the temptation to sort of run around and recreate scenes from Robot or Spearhead from Space, because it's very identifiable.
I love seeing you, Simon, rolling around in a wheelchair.
As soon as you get there, Sarah, you know exactly where you are. It's very, very obvious and apparent. But they did it all on video. This was a choice on Barry Lett's part, because of that he knew that they were going to have a lot of CSO work later on with the giant robots, and so because that had so many problems with the film on Invasion of the Dinosaurs, when they blew the dinosaurs up and the dinosaurs were floating because they were on video and the location was on film, it was all disastrous. And so that's why Barry Letts decided to do all of this on video.
I can't help but notice that everywhere that Tom is, any space he inhabits, any prop he's working with, it's completely different to anything that John Pertwee would have done.
Yeah, he would never have done this.
Look at him sat there in the back of that pickup.
And Tom, of course, always said that he used to find interesting ways to sit in a chair. He didn't want, as the Doctor, just want to sit in a chair. He wants to find it. So here we are. We're halfway through the first episode, 15 minutes into Tom Baker as the Doctor.
Doesn't stand on formality. He makes himself at home.
He's already setting the die on how his Doctor is going to be by slouching completely unconventionally in the back of a truck, but in the way that a kid might. Again, he's thinking like a child.
Yeah, how long are we going to be here? As if he's stuck at a service station halfway up the motorway.
Oh, they had a damp day for filming that day, didn't they? It looks really cold and miserable. It really does.
That's that lady on the right there, who plays Miss Winters. I can't remember the actress's name. She was married to Dennis Waterman at the time, wasn't she? That's Hannah Waterman's mother, the actress Hannah Waterman's mother.
Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
Oh, she's a nasty piece of work in this. And I always thought she was, the better villain of the piece. I suppose in many ways she was.
Yeah, she is. She's good.
And it's not often there's female antagonists in
No,
Doctor Who. I mean,
I think
you get the
that
odd sort of
tries
femme
much.
fatale with a small F, but not an actual sort of villainous woman.
And of course, the actor playing Jellicoe went on to play the head of Stengos in Revelation of the Daleks. He's the
Did he really?
Oh,
he's in the
yeah.
glass Dalek in Revelation of the Daleks.
Wow.
You just see his head.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
No, I didn't.
Natasha,
Exactly. Kill me.
I love that this room
kill me,
says.
child. Oh,
I love that this room says positively no admittance. There's a big neon sign.
apart from you lot.
Not private or anything like that. No, let's really draw attention to it.
Yeah, positively.
Oh.
But it's
What they
interesting
call
because
positive discrimination. Yes, Simon.
Yeah.
Sorry, Simon.
well, no, all I was going to say was as thin as the story is on Terence Dix's part, it's cracking along at a good old pace. This is really
Yeah.
moving. This almost feels like episode 4. I don't know about episode 1.
I mean, is it just the fact that Terence Dix was so adept at this stuff by
I
this
think
point?
so.
He was so efficient as a writer.
I think so.
Knew his craft inside out.
And he knew Doctor Who inside out, didn't he? That's the thing. He knew the show so well by this point. And of course, he'd created, hadn't he, this sort of myth that an outgoing script editor always wrote the opening story of the next season after they had left, which of course was complete rubbish. He made it up entirely just to get himself a job.
Yeah.
What a bullshitter.
After finishing on the script editor on John Pertwee. I mean, look at Tom with his legs up in the air. That's a really awkward position to get into.
Famous last word.
He's just so doctorish, isn't he? This is again. It's a decent attempt at a model shot, but it's lacking somehow. But it's a clever conceit that they've come up with. Although quite how the robot is supposed to have burrowed under the ground is anybody's guess.
It's the first time I've ever really thought about it.
It's completely nonsensical. It just doesn't
Because he's a
make any
quite
sense at all.
unwieldy piece of kit. I mean, you could say that he's sort of built a little bit like a corkscrew.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That shot of Tom jumping out of that's really athletic, jumping out of the Jeep. And that, of course, comes back to what you were saying, Dan, about why they'd cast Ian Marter to do that kind of stuff. But when you see Tom doing that in his first episode, it's pretty obvious he can do pretty much anything.
So all the children out there watching who are thinking, God, this man's a wimp, sitting loafing around, the Doctor would have sorted this out. As soon as there's actual danger, he's there, he's sprinting right into it. I love this costume. I know that they took away different parts of it. There's probably a little too much going on, but the cardigan, the necktie, I just love it so much.
It's funny, isn't it? Because they really did cast the archetypal mad scientist.
Yes, they did.
Well, Sarah, the hair, apparently Edward Burnham himself, when he was cast, he sort of literally ruffled up his hair and said, "Would you like me to look like this?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's a mad scientist." So he sort of came up with the hair himself. He's a great character. Again, it's a character that could only appear in Doctor Who, in that it wouldn't appear in any other adult drama. You wouldn't get a character like this in any other adult drama. It's kind of kids' TV, but of course, Doctor Who is really not kids' TV by this point. It's somewhere in between the two. It's neither exclusively for adults or exclusively for kids.
I like how he's dressed to match the set as well.
It's a drab old set, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't think I'd noticed before that he's kneeling up on a desk as well. It's very physical. This.
I love the fact that he just decides to eat a sandwich for no apparently good reason. I think, as I recall, I could be wrong on this. I have a feeling Liz Sladen couldn't drive at this point. I'm pretty sure she couldn't drive. And so she's only just about able to, I can't remember whether they sort of pushed her out of shot or whether she's just about able to sort of turn the car on enough to sort of drive a little bit.
She looks so pretty in
that. In fact, that probably isn't even Liz Sladen, I would imagine. That could be why they put the hat on her.
Yeah.
Could well be. I would
You're
say.
right,
I'm
that's
pretty
fine.
sure that she's not driving that.
Oh.
I love that red jacket of Tom's. Didn't last long. Didn't last beyond this season.
No.
But I loved the red jacket.
It's very similar to Sylvester's jacket in
Yes,
the
it
cut
is.
of it.
You're right. You're right. Isn't she adorable, Liz Sladen? She's just effortlessly good. She's just
And
great.
her way
isn't she?
with people.
Who would refuse Liz Sladen?
Beyond me. Beyond me.
It's nicely shot. That's a lovely shot. I've never really noticed that before, but that's a lovely shot through the balustrades.
Who directed this one, Simon?
It's Barry Letts, isn't it?
Is it
Barry Letts? We'll find out in a minute. Sure, it's Barry.
I love that she climbed that with them heels on. I like.
No, it's Christopher Barry. I do apologise. It's Christopher
yes.
Barry that directed it. Of course it is. Very, very capable
Go for it.
pair of hands.
Go for it.
And I remember, I have distinct memories of this, of knowing it was building up to a cliffhanger and feeling very, very fearful because, of course, we all loved Sarah Jane Smith at that point. And so you knew she was in danger. And it's great.
Do you remember still being in doubt of the Doctor at this point, or was the spell already been cast?
No, the spell had been cast, but I definitely associated with Sarah more than the Doctor, simply because she was such a familiar face and she was so loved. But I remember that so clearly. I remember the robot just lurching into view.
I still love this design. It's another Jim Aitchison classic,
correct,
isn't
it? It is.
Must look great on paper when they got the drawings through. Fantastic, Jim.
It's
now how are we going to do it?
Design. It's a brilliant design. So clever. It's a beautiful design, actually. It's very sort of art deco.
Old school,
Yes, I was just thinking
old school
that,
thrills.
I just wish they'd have left him speaking until the next episode and just have him,
Oh, that's really interesting point, Sarah. And you're right, actually. It would be so much more powerful if he just lumbered out.
Patricia Maynard, that's her name. Yeah.
And you just got that. Yeah, that would be so much more effective. You just want to see but of course it became a staple of sort of this era of Doctor Who was that you would see alien hands in the foreground, and then the cliffhanger would invariably be at the reveal of the monster at the end of it. So they were absolutely setting the template at that point for that. I really enjoyed that. It's still it's far from the greatest Doctor Who episode you're ever going to see, but it's just absolutely got something about it. It rockets along. It doesn't hang around. It doesn't give itself chance to get boring. So it might not, as I say, be the most exciting story in the world, but it's not boring. It's far from boring. No. It doesn't let the grass grow under its very big feet.
No, I'd say it's pretty serviceable. It does everything it needs to.
Yeah. And it does introduce the Doctor so beautifully. And it is clever that they finish on the cliffhanger with Sarah, because, going back to what you were just saying, Dan, I think they include the Doctor just enough for you to absolutely be left at the end of the episode knowing that this is the Doctor and you're not disappointed, you don't feel shortchanged. But focusing on Sarah being the one in peril makes absolute sense for the cliffhanger. It would be nonsensical to have the Doctor in peril at the end of episode 1. It's totally logical to have the companion, and it just works well. It just works well with her being threatened by. We've already seen. I like the fact that you've already seen that effect of the mosaiced mirror effect. So you know that that's where the danger lies. You know that that's the evil baddie. And so bringing it back in at that point, Sarah's in a heck of a lot of danger. Just works beautifully, and say the reveal of the robot is just it's breathtaking. It is fantastic.
Do you think that it looks 50 years old?
No,
No, I don't
Doesn't
think it does. No.
It's a good question.
Funny,
That
isn't
doesn't
it?
to me. Apart from the hairstyles on Benton and the Brig, which are very mid-70s. No,
No.
I don't think it doesn't look
Because
70
I'm
years
still at
old,
the
does
point,
it?
Sarah, where somebody says, 50 years ago, my mind automatically goes back to the early 60s. Everything was in black and white 50 years ago, for a start.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. And so the idea that kind of time has moved on, that we're 11 years since, Day of the Doctor, all that kind of stuff. And so in real time, then we would be here. It still has a kind of freshness about it. It's got a modern pace to it, which I don't think
Yes.
I was conscious of until I've just watched it here with you both. And
No, I don't think I
Yeah.
clocked that it motors along quite as well as it does. Again, it's only sitting here watching and critiquing it now that you realise how fast it moves. A lot faster, to be honest, than a lot of the Pertwee stories. And a lot of those Pertwee stories do look their age. They do look dated, as much as I love them, whereas this doesn't look dated. But in many ways, this is a sort of a Pertwee story because it's by Barry Letts. It's the last one to be produced by Barry Letts and written by the outgoing script editor. It does look like and plays like a Pertwee story.
Yes.
But as you say, Dan, you could never imagine Pertwee playing the Doctor the way Tom does. And how much of is that in the writing, and how much is it in Tom's portrayal? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the lines and the sort of caricaturization that Terence gives the Fourth Doctor.
how much of the childlike quality came from Terence and how much of it came from Tom? I get the impression it pretty much all came from Tom.
I think so.
Yeah, I would say so. 'Cause I just think that is Tom's personality. I just think that's what he did. He just brought himself.
But it's a very confident first portrayal, isn't it? Because considering that is the first stuff that he shot as the Doctor, and it was shot pretty much back to back with Planet of the Spiders.
I knew that this was filmed first,
yeah,
or concurrently even. But
yeah, it
that's
was
why
concurrent.
I thought I was surprised at how, like you said, how confident he is. I thought, well, did he at least have time? The stuff we're watching in the studio, was this at least filmed second? Maybe just people got on with it then, and there was less time to dick around and to worry about would the audience pick up on this and that and the other. Just get out there and do it and kind of hope for the best.
I think that's what was happening, to be honest. And Liz Sladen was literally having to go between two units. So she'd be shooting on Planet of the Spiders in the morning, and then she'd have to go over and start shooting on Robots in the afternoon, and then she'd go back to Planet of the Spiders. So it's quite. I think she was doing the studio for Planet of the Spiders at the same time as doing the location for Robot. And that was one of the things that Liz Sladen spoke about, how she felt she struggled a little bit because by the time she arrived on Robot, Tom and Nick Courtney and John Levine had already sort of bonded and formed a really good relationship. Yeah. Whereas she'd been stuck finishing off Planet of the Spiders, and she arrived on Robot feeling a little bit like the odd one out. And she just struggled to sort of find her feet, as it were, and feel that she had a relevance on the new version of Doctor Who. And it gave her a degree of sort of lack of confidence. And it was only later on in the season that she really began to bond with Tom. And away they went. So, yeah, she had a bit of a tough time on this one, by all accounts.
It's been a little while since I've watched this. And the first time I saw Robot was on VHS, like a lot of classic Doctor Who. And so I was lucky enough to get all 4 episodes in one afternoon. Yes. I could watch them in whatever speed, momentum that I wanted to. I put my $10.99 down, taking it home, and that was that. And Woolworths or from Smith's. But I think I did used to sort of ration them a little. So for me, this is sort of tied to the 1990s, really. I'd seen that one clip of the Doctor looking in the mirror on Blue Peter, and that was all I'd got to go on for like 10, 12 years. And I think it could be that. It could be that fascination and that wanting to see this story, the longing to see this story for so long, is the reason why it's my favourite of season 12, even now.
Oh, really? Is
really?
it?
Wow.
That's
And
interesting.
and there were some big hitters in season 12.
They were, yeah.
But this remains my personal favourite.
Wow.
And it's because of it's all to do with the characterization, nothing to do with the story. It's nothing even to do with Jim Acheson's robot design, which I really love. It's all to do with the characterization.
Do you remember, Sarah, when you first saw it, and what sort of was it the first Tom that you saw, or had you seen others
No,
before?
I saw this probably around 2013.
Right.
So as we were building for the 50th, I thought, I better, watch some more classic. No, I just kind of did a tick list of, things you should watch. So, I did.
Yeah.
I think one of the first stories I watched was City of Death. It was the big
hitter.
Genesis of the Daleks.
Yeah.
The Ark in Space, which I think is actually my favourite story of season 12. I love the Ark in Space. So it was quite, because it's not a classic.
No.
So yeah, it did take me quite a while, but then I felt like I'd got a duty to watch it because it was his first story. And when I did watch it, it felt strange. I didn't really like the robot.
Wow, really?
It's very cheesy.
No, it is.
Like Dan was saying, yeah, the robot.
It makes no practical sense at all.
No, not at all.
Well, it's so cumbersome, and yeah, like Dan was saying, the story is actually, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it's the least important part. It's getting to know this Doctor, getting to know this new dynamic.
Very similar to the Christmas Invasion in that respect. I think that they're
very, very much
brothers.
And so maybe
Tennant in the dressing gown and the mucking about in his nightshirt. I was like, oh, I can see.
It's the same feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
To allow us to get to love a new Doctor. And I do like, again, that this was a deliberate decision on Terence's part, that there was no confusion as to whether this is the Doctor or not. He felt with Spearhead from Space, there was a bit of a...
Been there, done that.
Yeah. There was, not that there was a mistake made, but because of the fact that the regeneration happens off camera, they had to have all this stuff about, was it the Doctor, was it not the Doctor? And he didn't want to do that again. As you say, he'd done that, and I think he felt it was a little bit laborious. Nicholas Courtney makes a point of saying that he's seen it before, so we can hit the ground running.
Any child who was a little bit freaked out by that distance that we spoke about earlier on in this image hovering out of the title sequence, 20 minutes later, I think they would be a little more assured, even if they couldn't see it all quite yet. And the path was set for a legendary stint leading this fantastic TV show. Even if Tom himself wasn't quite sure by this point. Yet again, I love doing these. I love doing these watch-alongs, and as a piece of Doctor Who history, obviously, it's difficult to detach it from the momentousness of another Who-niversary. I'm going to keep using that word and see if it sticks. I don't think it's going to fly. Because we're always, we can't, can we celebrate this? I don't think we reasonably can, but we can certainly mark it, can't we? I think that's all fair.
I think it's completely fair to mark, and I do think it's fair to celebrate the fact that Tom Baker has now been on our screens as Doctor Who for 50 years, and still is, and we still love him just as much. In fact, I think we probably love him more now. As every year goes by, we love him just a little bit more. He is one of the last great English eccentrics, and an absolute legend and a hero to me, certainly. And so, yeah, I actually think we can and celebrate it. I think we should.
Yeah.
Still the Doctor, Sarah?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Simon and I, we went to see A Christmas Carol just the other week, and Tom appears in that as Jacob Marley. And
yes,
no matter how old he's getting, he's looking a little frail now, but that voice remains.
Yes. He still is the Doctor. You're transported straight back there. His voice hasn't changed, and it is, let's be honest here, it is one of the best voices ever to grace British television. It just is.
Absolutely.
His voice is a legend in its own right, let alone Tom Baker himself. Tom is just, he casts such a long shadow over the show. It's inconceivable to think whether we'd even still be here if it wasn't that Tom Baker had been cast as the Doctor, and it's bigger than it was been up to that point, and bigger than it's ever been since, to be honest. So we still salute the man. He is a legend.
As I have been known to say now and again, we always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40 in its various forms, but we'll always have the time and space and the will to talk about Tom Baker. So it seems probably more of these commentaries on the way, doubtless now and again featuring Tom. So let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about, and your thoughts too about this momentous anniversary. 50 years of the Fourth Doctor as played by Tom Baker. What does he mean to you? What are your thoughts about Robot generally and this start for the iconic fourth incarnation of the character? Is it a favourite of yours, or is it one that you kind of watch out of duty? There's no wrong answers about any of this, is there, Sarah? But what would Christmas be without a little bit of magic? And Tom Baker very much is magic, I would say. So yeah, this is to mark Tom Baker's 50th anniversary in that title role. And thank you for your company, both.
It's been
I'm really
a pleasure.
We did this.
Oh, I've loved it. I'm really enjoying doing these watch-alongs.
It's been so much fun.
Perfect Christmas present too, of course. So yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll see you in the comments.